October 20th, 2014, from Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was the Houston Texans at the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football. Houston won the toss and they elected to defer, so the Steelers would start with the ball. They would end up punting after 8 plays, and so the Texans would take over with about 11.5 minutes left in the first, and they had the ball on their own 6-yard line, but they would end up bringing the ball up towards midfield and into Pittsburgh territory. And then on 3rd and 3 from the Pittsburgh 44, Arian Foster ran for a 33-yard run to bring the ball to the Pittsburgh 11, and then Fitzpatrick hit Blue for an 11-yard touchdown pass to make it 7-0 Texans over the Steelers. So the Texans got on the board first. So now Pittsburgh got the ball with less than 6 minutes left in the first. They started off on their own 20. They brought the ball towards midfield and they got into Houston territory. Then on 3rd and 9 from the Houston 48, Ben Roethlisberger dropped back to pass and he was sacked by Merciless, and he fumbled the ball. Merciless then forced it, and Watt recovered. So J.J. Watt got the recovery. So now it was the Texans' ball on the Pittsburgh 46, and they ended up bringing the first quarter to a close as they were right near the red zone. So after one, it was Houston 7, Pittsburgh nothing. So opening up the second quarter, the Texans had the ball on the Pittsburgh 23. And then a few plays later, they would be forced to kick a field goal as Bullock came out to kick a 39-yarder, and it was now 10-0 Houston over Pittsburgh. The Steelers then went 3 and out, and they punted the ball back to the Texans. So now the Texans would take over with about 12 minutes left in the first half, and they had the ball on their own 29. They brought it into Pittsburgh territory and into field goal range. They got all the way to the 20, but then their drive stalled, and on 4th and 6, they ended up bringing Bullock out to kick his second field goal of the game. This one from 38 yards out to make it 13-0 Houston over Pittsburgh. So now the Steelers had the ball on their own 14 with about a little over 7 minutes left before halftime. Roethlisberger was then sacked by J.J. Watt as it was almost a safety, but he was down on the 5-yard line is where they ruled him down, even though it almost looked like he was down on the 3 maybe, but it was where his knee went down. So now it was 2nd and 19. They picked up 4 yards on a pass to Brown, and then on 3rd and 15, we had a defensive offside penalty. It was actually against J.J. Watt, and that made it 3rd and 10 from the 14. And then Big Ben hit Le'Veon Bell, and he went 43 yards all the way into Houston territory to pick up the first down on the Houston 43. Roethlisberger then hit Heath Miller for a 13-yard pass, and then Bell ran for 5 yards. And now it was a first down on the Houston 30. So then 2nd and 5, and it was an incomplete pass. And then Roethlisberger was sacked on 3rd down by Merciless as he sacked him yet again. And now Suisham would come out to attempt a 44-yarder, and it was good, and it was now 13-3 as the Steelers had gotten on the board and now trailed the Texans by 10. The Texans would now get the ball and go 3 and out, and so they punted it back to the Steelers, who now took over on their own 37 with less than 2 minutes left before halftime. Roethlisberger hit Bell for a 28-yard pass, and that made it a first down on the Houston 35. And then Roethlisberger hit Bryant for a 35-yard touchdown. He stepped up in the pocket and he hit Bryant in stride in the end zone for the touchdown. And it was now 13-10 as the Steelers had cut the Texans' lead to 3. So now the Texans took over with about a minute and a half left before the intermission, and they were backed up against their own end zone with the ball on their own 5-yard line because of a fumble on the kickoff. And so on first down, Fitzpatrick hit Foster, but it was only for a yard, and Pittsburgh called a timeout. So on 2nd and 9 now, Foster went to run the ball, and he ended up fumbling it. His world's calls the fumble, and now the Steelers would take over on the Houston 3-yard line. Roethlisberger then did a little toss to Brown, a little flick. It was like an end around, and then Brown cut back the other way, and he threw the ball to Moore for a touchdown, and it was now 17-13, Steelers over the Texans. So a little bit of a trick play there. It's kind of like a fake end around turned into a receiver pass to the other receiver, and Pittsburgh was now in the lead by 4 points with about a minute left before halftime. Now the Texans had the ball on their own 20. Fitzpatrick dropped back to pass, and he threw an interception as Kiesel intercepted him, and now the Steelers had the ball on the Houston 8-yard line. Roethlisberger then hit Brown for a 6-yard pass, and now on 2nd and goal from the 2, Roethlisberger would hit Le'Veon Bell for the touchdown, and it was now 24-13 as the Steelers had just scored 24 unanswered points at the end of the first half. And it really, I'll tell you, the Houston Texans, have they ever heard of a knee? Have you heard of a knee? Do you know what that is? Because they did hear of a knee, because now they took the knee, and we went to halftime, but not after the Steelers had made the score. Pittsburgh 24, Houston 13. So now Houston would take over for the first possession of the third quarter. They would go 3 and out. So now the Steelers got the ball, but they would punt 6 plays later, and the Texans now took over with about 9.5 minutes left in the third. And they would end up getting into Pittsburgh territory, but their drive stalled on the Pittsburgh 41, and they would punt the ball back to the Steelers. So now the Steelers took over on their own 1-yard line with a little over 4 minutes left in the third. But they managed to get out of the shadow of their own end zone when on 3rd and 9 from their own 2, Roethlisberger hit Darius Hayward-Bay for a 17-yard pass that made a first down on the 19. Blunt then ran for 5 yards. Then Roethlisberger hit Brown for 6, and then Blunt ran for a couple more yards. And that made it 2nd and 8 from the 32. But they then lost 2 yards on the last play of the third quarter. So after 3, it was still 24-13 Steelers over the Texans. So now to open up the fourth, the Steelers had the ball on their own 30. And they weren't able to get the first down. They came close. It was kind of a wild play. They fumbled. They recovered. But they ended up getting 9 yards out of the play. And it ended up in a punt for the Steelers in their drive. So now the Texans would take over on their own 26 with about 14.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And they would drive into Pittsburgh territory. Went on first down from the 37. Ryan Fitzpatrick hit Andre Johnson for a 24-yard pass that brought the ball to the Pittsburgh 39. Then on 3rd and 7 for the Pittsburgh 36, Fitzpatrick hit Johnson for a 21-yard pass. And it was now a first down on the Pittsburgh 15 as the Texans were now in the red zone and primed and ready to score, but then their drive stalled, and on the 13-yard line it was 4th and 8, and they would bring Bullock out to kick a 31-yard field goal, and that would make the score 24-16 as the Texans had now cut the Steelers' lead to just 8 points. So now Pittsburgh took over with less than 12 minutes left in this game. They had the ball on their own 18. And they would bring it up towards midfield when Le'Veon Bell ran for 20 yards on a first down from the 29. And then once they got into Houston territory, they faced a 3rd and 10. And they were actually right there on their own 49 after kind of going back and forth on that 50. And Roethlisberger then hit Heath Miller for a 7-yard pass, and then there was a defensive holding against the Texans, and that made it a first down. So now they're on the Houston 46. Roethlisberger drops back to pass and hits Antonio Brown for a 30-yard reception. It was right there on the sideline, an amazing catch as somehow Brown was able to corral it and hold it against his body as he was being tackled out of bounds, and he got both feet in. And they challenged the catch, and it was upheld. So now it was a first down in the red zone on the Houston 16. They ended up getting backed up, and they ended up being 3rd and 16 from the 22. Roethlisberger then hit Brown for a 15-yard reception, and that made a 4th and 1 on the 7, and they got a penalty to bring them back. And then Suisham came out to kick a 30-yard field goal, and it was now 27-16 as the Steelers extended their lead to 11 points, which would be 2 scores at least. So now the Houston Texans would take over with less than 6 minutes in this game. They had the ball on their own 14. They picked up 6 yards on first down with a pass from Fitzpatrick to Johnson. On 2nd and 4, Fitzpatrick dropped back to pass. He hit Hopkins, but then Hopkins fumbled and Polamalu recovered. So Troy Polamalu recovers the fumble that was caused by Mitchell. And now the Steelers had the ball on the Houston 39, and they would kind of run down the clock a little bit, and they would end up going for a field goal after picking up a first down. And Suisham came out to kick a 40-yarder, and that made it 30-16 Steelers over the Texans, as they had now extended their lead to 14 points. The Texans now took over with a little over 3 minutes left in this game. They had on their own 14, and they needed 2 touchdowns to tie it. They would end up getting into Pittsburgh territory off of a roughing the passer penalty after a 22-yard reception by Johnson. So that ended up with a first down on the 43 of Pittsburgh. And then they ended up picking up another first down when on 2nd and 2, Fitzpatrick hit Graham for an 18-yard pass. So now they were in the red zone. And then on 2nd and 10, Fitzpatrick hit Hopkins for a 16-yard pass. So now it's 1st and goal on the 1. And then they had a penalty, but then they got the touchdown on the next play when actually J.J. Watt came in as an eligible receiver, but Fitzpatrick ended up hitting Arian Foster for a 1-yard touchdown pass that made this game within 7 with the score now Pittsburgh 30, Houston 23. So now they went for an onside kick, but they did not get it, and so the Pittsburgh Steelers recovered the ball, and they would end up taking 3 knees, and they won this game by a touchdown. And the final score, Pittsburgh 30, Houston 23. And after the victory, the Steelers are now 4-3 on the season, and the Texans are now 3-4. And in this game, Ben Roethlisberger was 23 for 33 with 265 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Antonio Brown actually threw a touchdown as well. The leading rusher in the game was Arian Foster with 20 carries for 102 yards, and the leading receiver was DeAndre Hopkins with 6 receptions for 108 yards. Ryan Fitzpatrick went 21 for 32 with 262 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Le'Veon Bell had 12 carries for 57 yards. He also had 8 receptions for 88 yards as well as a touchdown. Antonio Brown had 90 yards off of 9 receptions. And for the defense, the leading tackler in this game was Lawrence Timmons. He had 12 tackles. He also had a sack and a couple tackles for losses. And he had the only sack for the Steelers. Merciless had 2 sacks, and J.J. Watt had a sack. So the Texans had 3 sacks altogether. And the game's lone interception was by Kiesel of the Steelers. So the Steelers hold on to win this one with the final score, Pittsburgh 30, Houston 23.